Hi, folks. In this episode, I'm going to share with you a recording of a conversation I had with a regular Being Human guest, Tom van der Lubbe, at the Forward Summit, which is a conference hosted by Management 3.0, a progressive management approach. And yeah, we had a great conversation on the topic of less is more and how Tom keeps it really simple at Visi, the mortgage advisory company that he is a leader in the Netherlands, and how they base basically their entire management philosophy around the golden rule. Don't do unto others that which you wouldn't have done unto yourself. Yeah, and really enjoy the conversation. We also get into how actually putting staff first, putting people first, results in customers getting a great experience, and how indeed Visi won the Zero Distance Award, which is given out in recognition of people who've built great customer relationships and are very responsive to their customers at Visi. So yeah, great conversation. We take a few questions from the audience. I hope you enjoy. Tom brings this principle to life at the company that he co-founded, Visi Mortgages. We'll be focusing on the award that they won recently, the Zero Distance Award, and Tom's philosophy and the philosophy they use at Visi, which is centered around the practical implementation of the Golden Rule. We should also say that Tom and I go back, he's a regular guest on my podcast, Being Human, and a quick tease, we're soon to be launching a book podcast, just the two of us, called You Should Read This. So watch out for that. So without further ado, Tom, why don't you give our audience just a little bit of a background to what Visi Mortgages is, and then tell us about this Zero Distance Award and why being small is so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. It's always nice to be together with you on a conference. Visi is a Dutch company, and we do mortgage advice. So very simple. When somebody wants to buy an apartment or a house, we support, and we choose the best mortgage, and we are paid by the client. So we're not paid by the bank. But that's not the reason I think we are on this conference. We are on this conference because we as a company put our people first and try to avoid as much as bureaucracy, difficult word, bureaucracy, as possible. And we were delighted that we got this award of Thinkers 50 and higher, the Chinese big company. And it was sent to me a couple of days ago. We got it a few months ago, and I have it actually in front of me, and it says, and I read it to you. It's always better if other people tell why we got an award. For its groundbreaking work in seeking to achieve zero distance, eliminating the distance between their employees, their operations, and their customers. That sounds beautiful. I couldn't say it in such nice words, but it means actually very simple. An advisor decides automatically, without any rules, what is the best way to serve a customer. So the idea of the golden rule. Imagine you would be the customer and not the advisor. What would you like? How would you like to be treated by your advisor? And we do this in all dimensions. So to keep it very, very simple. And there is only this rule, the golden rule. Treat other people like you wanted to be treated yourself. No handbooks, nothing.
Wow. And so what does that mean for your advisors then? How do people sort of respond to by being given this much trust and this much latitude to treat customers how they like? Is everybody comfortable with that, or do some people need some training into it?
No, actually everybody is comfortable with that. I mean, I didn't hear anybody complaining about that. I mean, there is this, let's say, formal education just for regulatory purposes. But the funny thing is, we don't need rules in normal life. So probably at home, you don't have a constitution or a handbook how to treat your children or your partner or your parents, etc. So it's very interesting that in normal life, we know exactly how to treat others. We also don't do a kind of yearly performance talks with our partner or decide on bonuses at the end of the year. So the normal thing is just to take the perspective of the person in front of you, doesn't matter in what kind of, let's say, setting, and just imagine how would you like to be treated. And it doesn't matter if you are a client or a supplier or even society or even nature, this principle always works.
Right. And as I understand it, this has meant that not only are you getting great feedback from your clients, but in terms of the way that your staff experience Visi, did you not win the Best Place to Work award? Is that right as well?
Yeah, we were very lucky. We're 3 years in a row in the Netherlands. We were number 1 in the small category. This year it was the last time we were in the category until 50 because we're already 60 people now. And this year we also got the number 1. We're the winner in Europe, also in the small category. So yeah, that was very nice. And actually the reason was that people felt very secure and informed, because at the beginning of the COVID crisis we said the only goal we have is to keep everybody on board. And we also said we're not going to fire anybody. It's about solidarity. And I think in times of crisis, and we also discussed this on one of your podcast episodes on being human, that in times of crisis people expect and want to show solidarity with each other. And that's what we did as a company. And I think that was the reason we became number 1 in Europe.
Right. Yes. Great. Well, we've got our first question here. This amount of trust to advisors means you have to find the right people for the job. Do you have specific rules, stroke methods there? Yeah. Is that the one place you don't have a rule? Is in or you have is the one place you have an absence of rules in hiring, or is even that just, you trust your people to make their own hiring choices?
I think it's a double question. I think everybody actually would like to act following this principle. Doesn't matter what aspect of life. And the second question, the teams decide themselves who to hire. So it's a decentralized way of hiring. So we try to avoid staff functions and what is called HR. Normally, we dislike the word HR because people are not resources. People are human beings. It's only facilitating processes, but that's it. But so to keep it very simple, you have, as an example, a credit department. There are 6 people working in this credit department. Those 6 people say, we need another colleague or we want to hire. Then they decide who wants to do the talks. And then 4 of those 6 people want to do these interviews, and everybody has a veto. And nobody has to explain why they don't think this colleague, for instance, doesn't fit to the team. So it's a very decentralized way of hiring, and it's all about a decentralized way of trusting each other, which, let's say, for other people in the other part of the company or as the co-founders, sometimes I would like to grow faster, but it's always about accepting the trust of the colleagues in the team. It's their decision who to hire.
Right. That makes sense. And you said something there. We've been back and forth about this question of what's the role of a leader in such a decentralized organization. But it sounds to me that what you're describing there, where you stop yourself stepping in and allow the contrast to continue despite your frustrations, that to me is an act of leadership. So is there something here about leaders of organizations such as Visi having to live the principles and act in accordance with them, even if it's frustrating for their own ambitions?
Yeah, I think that you always have to zoom out. So it doesn't matter what it is. So if you build a company or a government or a state, I think the main role is the role of the architect to create an environment. So that doesn't mean that we don't ask our people what can we do, but it's a very defensive way of supporting. So we asked, for instance, in the COVID crisis, we asked, what kind of environment do we have to create that you want to work your whole life at the company? So this kind of questions we ask, but we're not telling them how to do their work or who to hire or how to manage the processes. That's not the role if you really want to create something. But it's the most difficult thing is that you have to create an environment to unlearn and to create an environment where people are willing and experiment to take responsibility. And that's something which is difficult sometimes, because we're all raised in this way of at school, where somebody tells there's only one right way, and we're waiting for somebody to tell us what is the right way. So it's really about facilitating.
Yeah, the leader as architect, the leader as facilitator. I like that. But also, it does sound to me like there's something about holding the principles. There's something there. You had to stop yourself stepping in and speeding up the hiring to stay consistent with the principles. Is that a sort of a frequent challenge for leaders in organizations like VD?
Not really, because let's say if you create an environment, and I also have to add that we have fixed salaries, no bonuses, fixed salary increases. So but that takes time, to be honest. But if you have this environment where people can exchange in a safe setting and ask each other, then it goes automatically. So it's in the end, it's about common sense. And if you just, let's say, feel insecure about something, you ask your colleagues. But it's this collective knowledge of the team, which is always superior to the individual knowledge, but the team will always be more virtue oriented than, let's say, money or whatsoever oriented. So the collective intelligence, but also the intellectual virtues of a bigger group always outweighs the interest of individuals, which you also see in societies, by the way.
Yeah. No. Well, and that's what we understand from the research on collective intelligence, that collective intelligence is always superior to the most intelligent individual in any group. So it sounds like you're experiencing that at Visi.
And it's even in the research, the collective intelligence of the group is bigger than the individual. It doesn't matter what subject. So even if a group doesn't know in a technical way about the subject, the collective intelligence of a group is always better than the individual, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, the research on that, and it runs counter to, I guess, the narrative in society that individual geniuses achieve the heights of intellectual accomplishments as opposed to groups. There's something else in this question I think it's maybe worth reflecting on. Do you find the right people? So you had a career in large corporations before you founded Visi. Is there anything you notice about the colleagues and the types of people you worked with in your prior life versus those that you now work with at Visi? Is there any difference in the profile that Visi attracts?
It's a very good question. And I think, yes, there is. So this kind of cultures, and I think we're not an exception. So a lot of small, medium-sized enterprises have more or less the same culture we have. I think it's more focused on the team. So this kind of I would say being human, or being more humble. So it's much more, what's my role in supporting others? So not it's not this big purpose, although let's say we want to change this financial industry, but in the end, if you work together, it's about supporting others. It's a little bit like a very good soccer team, where it's much more about playing together than trying to be an individual excellent player.
Right.
And that's something which, if everybody does this, and there is an enormous focus on the team performance, it makes also a lot of fun to play together.
So people. Yeah, cool. Sorry.
No, that's so, and I think people notice this, and if you have, and let's say what you can do by building a company is to create, for instance, a salary model which creates a fundament, or by abolishing bonuses, or by creating fixed salaries, or by creating fixed salary increases, so people don't have to think, does my interacting or if I show vulnerability, does this have an effect on my salary? And that creates a kind of collective psychological safety, which creates an enormous performance, and it creates an enormous atmosphere of helping each other. So let's say not only in these times of crisis, but let's say if somebody has parents at home or grandparents at home who are sick, then all this information is shared. And somebody checks in the morning and says, Richard, my grandfather is sick. I have to help my grandmother. And everybody says, Richard, take care of your grandmother, or take
Right.
care of your grandparents. What can I take from your calendar? And if people start to do this kind of stuff, it's all about reciprocity.
Yeah. Just reminds me of a friend of mine who was cascaded by her boss recently for daring to take her car to the garage, which meant she was like half an hour late for work. And her boss demanded to know why she couldn't get her car fixed at the weekend. I mean, that's the sort of level of culture that exists in some places. I mean, it's so contrasting to what you're describing.
What is perhaps interesting for people, because we're still in the COVID crisis, and there's also this link to those awards, although it's not about winning awards. Awards only may be an indication that something in certain companies is going in the right direction. But I think what is interesting to share is that at the beginning of the COVID crisis, where nobody knew what would happen March last year, we had a kind of traffic light system, red, orange, and green, and we just asked ourselves which colleagues are in what category. And the red part of the traffic light were those people who had partners who worked in hospitals or in some kind of crucial professions, and we said to them, you don't have to work. So because there was also, people had to do homeschooling, for instance. So if you have 2 children and your partner has to work in the hospital, then you can't work because everybody was sitting remote at home. So what happened? Those people who were in this red category, they felt very much taken care of by their colleagues, and what did they do? We thought, okay, they will not work at all. No, they didn't. They worked in the evenings and supported their colleagues. And then you had this category. In the orange category, there were those people who had to split, let's say, the work, because let's say both were working at home and had children. I was in this middle category, and then you had to take care of the kids half of the day, and your partner had to take care the other part of the day. And I worked, for instance, then half of this day in the evening and just compensated it. But everybody did. So there was an enormous security of, you didn't have to be afraid of losing your job, and everybody was in a way finding out how can we work together as a team, but still give priority to the situation, for everybody in the individual level, so to say.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's true of many of these highly decentralized organizations, is they're very resilient. We see that with Handelsbanken, came through the financial crisis, grew during the financial crisis. The other famous example that some people may know, Semco in Brazil, a big industrial firm that went through numerous economic crises and came through unscathed. So we've got another question here. Just curious, but how about the absences/holidays? No rules there? ?
No, we don't have the culture of, let's say, which is sometimes see that you can have holidays whenever you want. We just have a kind of fixed amount of holidays. I think it's 30 or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but because it's so there's this culture of flexibility. We never had a discussion about that, and we also have, for instance, the possibility of taking sabbatical if you want to travel for a couple of months, etc. So the funny thing is that this whole discussion about, let's say, holidays is an American topic, but if you then see the research which is done on that, people sometimes fear to take holidays at all. So I actually think that the European model is much better. You have fixed holidays, and that could be, for instance, one of the few responsibilities of a central HR department, or what we call people first department, just to take care that everybody takes the holidays, and not some people don't, and also react if people are not willing or feel reluctant to take holidays if they are in, let's say, in a private situation, which would make sense. Then there is a central responsibility to say just family first, and then
Right.
and then if you have solved the stuff, then come back to work, so to say.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. I'm curious. So this is a talk about less is more. Small is beautiful. You've already reached 50 people at Visi. If small is beautiful, why do you want to continue to grow Visi?
Two aspects. One aspect is that we want to change the financial industry, and as long as we are so small, we don't have the power to do so. And the second part is, and I'm reflecting to our book podcast. You should read this, where the first book we discussed was Small's Beautiful. That's why I just come up to this. That this whole idea of the Buddhist economy is to create as many jobs as possible. So I like the idea of a huge corporation, not for being big, but creating an enormous amount of jobs. So I still like the idea of creating an enormous amount of jobs to also change the way we work. So I admire companies like Bosch, which is not stock listed, and they have 400,000 people. And actually Bosch Power Tools, they also got the Zero Distance Award, has 20,000 people. So this whole idea of building a huge corporation with a lot of people, all functioning in a decentralized way, is something I find really, really attractive, because it also creates an enormous security in society, so to say.
Right. And you don't fear losing the culture? Because when I was giving a talk yesterday, that was one of the questions that came up when I was giving examples of firms like Visi. Was the big question, yes, but does this scale? Do you have examples of large companies succeeding with this? So do you have a fear that you may lose the culture as you grow?
It's always difficult to say. I would say it depends on how do you define the culture. So if the main thing is that it's a decentralized culture, just take Bosch as an example. If you just see when Robert Bosch, which is not so known because we read too many books on American companies, but when Robert Bosch found the company, he's a little bit as he's a German, it's a little bit comparable with Henry Ford, who doubled the salaries of the people. I mean, 100 years later, still 400,000 people working in this company in Stuttgart in southern Germany, and it's a global company. So why wouldn't this work? And we have enough time to experiment. So if something works in a decentralized way, and you have installed those systems, Haier is also a good example. The Chinese company who installed the Zero Distance Award, they also have an enormous amount of people, and then it's called micro companies. So I would say grow but stay small. Yeah? So that's it.
Yeah, and that's using the fractal model, which is a term that Julian Wilson at Matt Black Systems in Brighton uses, where they continue to grow, but create it's the same principle. Mini enterprises at Matt Black Systems actually create micro enterprises around individuals, but you're saying you're going to keep it small in cells. So how do you see that working? Are you going to do you imagine how will each cell be defined, do you think, at Visi as you scale?
I mean, what we know, let's say, from big structures, if you take, I'm a historian, so I like especially older examples. If you take, for instance, the Roman army, 2,500 years old, without any modern communication, let's say, just imagine the Roman Empire. How does this work? Probably you have, let's say, a certain amount of people, and then at a certain point it becomes, let's say, not productive anymore. So, but I don't know where this, what is the fixed amount? Is this, let's say, in the Roman Empire it was, I think, 7 for the smallest group. Will it be 20? Will it be a local group? But you can also take the European Union as an example with the different levels. So the subsidiarity principle. So you have small cities or small neighborhoods, but you can still have in Europe, 350 million people. So as long as you are able to define where the responsibility is, I think the responsibility of people where they live is the neighborhood. So I think the city is too big. I think it's about the neighborhood where people know each other. But why wouldn't you be able to install, let's say, fixed rules or flexibility on this level of a neighborhood in whole Europe? Because you already have cities, and we have provinces, and we have national states, and we discuss foreign policy in national parliaments, and we don't discuss this in a city, so to say. So I think it's all about architecture.
Right, and it sounds like you're gonna be figuring it out as you go along, continuing to experiment.
And there's also something, let's say, we figure out also in our parliamentary systems where it makes sense to discuss what, or to experiment with a plebiscite or something like that. So I think it's a continuous process. So as long as you don't have a fixed mindset where there is no flexibility, just go on experimenting.
Right. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And again, that's exactly what Julian Wilson at Matt Black Systems was saying is, when asked, how did you get here? Well, he's like, we just kept experimenting according to certain principles, and that's how they'll continue to run. It sounds like that's how you'll continue. Okay, it looks like we've got excuse me. 1 minute left. Any final thoughts to round off, Tom, on this topic before we close out?
Operations like we reflect on the states. So we are with our parliamentary systems in a very interesting phase. On the one hand, you have demagogues, etc. On the other hand, you have a lot of people practicing a very local ways of cooperation. And I think we have to do the same in big corporations.
Right. Okay, well, it looks like we're just about up on time. Thank you very much.